Welcome everybody back to ECONversations. We're joined today by Patrick Ellis, our host, Kimberly Davidson from the city of Wildomar, and Rob Moran from the county of Riverside. Take it away, Patrick.
Thank you, Scott. Agajanian with the city of Murrieta. We're glad to be back. We took a week off last week because I had some prior engagement stuff that needed to be done. But not that you know necessarily what date this is, probably other than what it says on YouTube there where we posted it. But I do want to welcome you all back. Thanks for joining us. We are talking about economic development in the region. I would like to talk today about a subject which is perseverance, right? We were talking offline a few weeks ago about kind of, what it takes in economic development to sometimes get some of these deals done and what have you. And I was talking about a story that I had told. Actually, it's funny, I've told it about 4 or 5 times now, I think, in the last 5 weeks. But basically is that the very first ICSC show that I went to with the city of Murrieta when I got here, the very first meeting I got put into was with Mr. Bruce Coleman, who was the economic development director at the time, on the opening day. So that would have been, so it was a Sunday morning at 8:30 in the morning at the Starbucks outside of West Hall, right? Yep, West Hall, with Mr. Ira Spilkey, who we all know Ira very well. And Ira is a very straightforward person, let's just say. And I remember that very first meeting that we met with Ira, and Ira said straight up to Bruce and I is that the only reason he agreed to meet with us was because Bruce was calling him about 30 or 40 times, and he wouldn't stop calling until he said yes. And so he finally made the meeting just so that Bruce would stop calling him. But he said, I'm never going to bring a project to Murrieta. It just doesn't fit what he works with, because he primarily works with, the up and coming fast casual on the west side type of stuff. But Bruce was persistent, and then Scott as well. When Bruce left, we've had a meeting with Ira Spilkey every single ICSC since that point. But the funny thing was I think it was about 3 years ago, maybe 4, but it was Scott and I, and I'm not sure if anyone else was in that meeting with us. And we sat down with Ira and, kind of getting ready for the same spiel from Ira. Except this time he started off the meeting differently, and he opened up his book and he said, I've got about 3 concepts that I might want to bring out your way. That was a game changer, right? But it was that persistency. It's, obviously it's persistency that's done effectively and from a very studious point, but
is persistency a word? There's consistency and persistent. Is persistency a word?
It is. This is ECONversations.
Which is also a word.
Just wondering if you were combining some, persistent and consistency to persistency. I wasn't sure.
Listen, if the president, and I'm not saying just this president, any president can come up with words, I can come up with words as well.
Okay, I was just checking.
Thank you.
It's all part of Patrick's strategy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Part of the
Thank you,
strategy.
Wilson. I appreciate
And his
that.
persistency.
Someone's got my back. So.
Well, at least you're being consistent.
Yeah.
Well done.
But that being persistent is extremely important in economic development. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that and how it can be, you can get easily frustrated, not by others, but by things that you have to do on a basis of, over and over and over again. So Kim, why don't you give me your thoughts about this? Since you have no problem jumping in.
With my persistency. It does pay off. I mean, I think we tend to forget sometimes that developers of all sorts and brokers, all of those people and all of the retailers, whether you're the parent company of Trader Joe's or whatever, it's still headed up by humans. And humans still react in certain ways to other humans, and they like being pursued. They like being important. So certainly if you don't ever burn a bridge in this business, you make a lot of friends, and you keep all of those irons in the fire all the time, because you never know which one is going to eventually pay off and from where, and it's usually from where you least expect it too. So I know that when I was working under Bruce Coleman, I learned very early on that the way he did, you treat everybody like they're going to be bringing gold to your city, because you don't know who they know, and you just don't know who they know, basically. And so there's no reason to not act like, so we would meet people that maybe in the immediate time didn't look like they could help bring anything to the city, but then over time we would find out that they were also involved, with this, that, and the other. They knew investors, they knew of EB5 projects, whatever the case may be. And one of the things too that I've shared in the past is another city that I worked for towards the north. Some of their big manufacturers that they got, we had asked the question when I was there, how did you end up leaving? Because they had started out in Orange County, these manufacturers, and they ended up in Riverside County. And we asked them, what brought you to Riverside County? And the answer was simple. They answered the phone. They had called their city government in Orange County before they had headed out. Hi, Christine. They were located in Orange County and had contacted their city government before they were ready to move, and their city government in Orange County never bothered to call them back, and they didn't feel loved, they didn't feel wanted, and they started calling around other cities in Riverside, and really the first person to answer the phone and make them feel loved and wanted was the person that got that manufacturer. So at the end of the day, these companies, whether you're talking about manufacturing, retail, developers, hotel developers, commercial developers, whatever you're talking about, they are still headed up by humans, and humans still interact with other humans in very similar ways. And one of those ways is they want to feel important, and they want to be pursued, and they want to make friendships over time, and they want to do business with their friends. And that's been my experience with it.
Very good. No, I love that. You're right. That kind of a analogy of you just never know who knows who is so true. Because you could be talking to what a lot of people consider it, a small independent, firm, but that guy may be a spinoff of, one of the, festival development group or something like that. And he knows all the right connections and stuff. So,
Right.
So, Scott, persistency.
Hey, Patrick, persistency. Hi,
Persistency.
Christine Damko from the city of Temecula. How you doing today?
Good. Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes.
Okay.
So first of all, I want to make a mention to Ira Spilkey, who I know is watching this out there somewhere. I still want a Boston's. And a fun story about Boston's is they came out and looked in the city of Murrieta once, and we had to wait to get into the building that we were going to look at. So I said, hey, let's go eat next door. And they said, great. This is a competitor of ours, and we'll see what their daytime traffic is like, and everything will work out. This will be a chance for us to see how much business. And I went off on a tear. I said, oh, that's wonderful. This place is always busy. It's always wall-to-wall people. This is going to be great. You're going to see how much business we do at lunchtime in Murrieta. We went into the restaurant. It was crickets. I had never seen it like that before. Nobody walked into the restaurant the entire time we were there. We had the whole place to ourselves, and this is a 7,000 square foot restaurant. This is a big building, and it was a complete fail because I sold them on the fact that you're going to see a comparative for what your restaurant's going to be like, and the imagery never came together. And I basically unsold them on the city of Murrieta. But I'll let you know out there, wherever you are, Boston's, we're rebounding. That was just one bad day. Things are good here. Daytime population over 100,000. So Ira Spilkey's story is a great example of building relationships. And I think Kim nailed it with all of the talk of humans and their desire to know one another. And it's completely true. I think that it's more than just having a transactional relationship with one person. It's just about the mode you set. And I think what's cool about the cities and the county here, the fact that we do this is we're each trying to build a culture or have an environment that is pro-business and friendly to business and welcoming. And that goes beyond just having an individual relationship. It touches every relationship you have every single day. So that when you work with any business, no matter how big or small, you don't make them feel big or small, you make them feel valued and wanted. And I think that's the goal that we all share, is making sure that we run in an environment that is warm and friendly to business, that always remembers at the end of the day, this is somebody's livelihood, whether it's a big corporation, whether it's a national franchise, whether it's a mom and pop. They're all important, just as Patrick's background screens are important. Every single one of them has value. And if you treat everyone like that, then you're never gonna miss the boat, right? You're never gonna treat somebody unwell, which is what we would never want to do. You always want to be welcoming and warm and engaging.
Very
Back
good.
to you, Patrick Ellis.
All right. So Christine Damko, good to see you.
Yes, good to see you.
As you can tell, I think at this point, we're talking about my new word, persistency, and being persistent, but also, along with that, the idea of creating these relationships, and that it takes time to attract these different businesses or developers to our area. Give us your thoughts kind of in that arena.
Persistency and creating relationships, I feel like, are two of the key words to an economic developer. And especially with retail, it takes, I would say, on average, 2 to 3 years of, you can say, relationship building, you can say constantly pursuing a certain retailer, either or, but it takes years. And in some cases, like Cheesecake Factory for us, it takes decades. And so I think we've all learned that that's part of the business. And when Scott was talking about, big versus small, it's so true, because I think 80% of our businesses have under 15 employees. And so, it's the small business is the backbone of our community. So that is also important as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Rob, from a county perspective, obviously, you come from a different mindset and a different angle, but you still have, areas of involvement and whatever. And I know you've seen Ira many times at the ICSC show.
Yeah, I think, for a city, I think it's slightly different as it relates to retail in terms of the approach, because I know you guys all get requests for very, very specific things, and we do too in the county and certain unincorporated communities. But a lot of times those retail centers will typically be in a city location or soon to be in a city location. And I've worked on a few shopping centers, but going back to I think the idea is, and Kim, everybody's touched on it so far, and Kim's touched on it too, is you're forming a relationship, but sometimes you're pitching a site or a location, either a specific, location for the project or even your city, that might be a little earlier than might normally be the case on the horizon for this particular type of business. Not always the case, but sometimes you're pitching things ahead of the curve, so to speak, and they're not quite there yet. So you're trying to establish that relationship. I'll give you an example from the industrial side, and I'm going to say this was probably 20 years ago. I don't remember exactly, but this was I was pitching a site on the 215 corridor to a plastics manufacturing company, and I was touring with the plant manager. And I remember, because one of the only industrial projects out there was in Paris. It was a SWRCED, if you all remember that group. Now it's surrounded by gigantic logistics facilities. But this plastics manufacturer, the plant manager who was there, 5 or 6 days a week, lived in Moreno Valley. So he was thrilled at the idea of being along the 215 corridor. But the owner of the plastics company lived in Laguna Beach, and he wanted us to zip up the toll road because they had already been built at the time, and he wanted to be about 20 minutes away from his plant. So they ultimately ended up being in Corona, which was closer to where the owner of the company. That's kind of tangential to the story here, but we were pitching these sites along the 215 corridor, and a lot of the industrial developers that I had really close relationships with that were along the 15 corridor in Miraloma, Ontario, and other areas said, there's no way, it's too far out, I'm not going to build there. Well, as you can see what's happened with the 215, everybody that's involved in industrial in any way, shape, or form is in that market. We're pitching it a little bit ahead of time, but ultimately people got there, you know, and that was, you know, the market kind of pushing it. So, but it's having those relationships with the brokers. And the other component to it is that, you know, there's a sort of a Darwinian aspect to working with brokers, in that if they don't, you know, make the kill, they don't eat. And so sometimes they're going to go to the lowest hanging fruit. Not in every case. You've got some that kind of look down the horizon, but if they don't make a deal right away that's going to satisfy their client today, you know, they're not going to get their commission. They're not going to get paid. And so some of them don't always look a little bit farther down the road. Not that those are the cases we're talking about here, but in those cases where you're maybe pitching something that's a little bit early, some won't take a look at it because it's just a little bit of a harder sell for them than might normally be the case when the market is prime, let's say. So just, you know, some random thoughts as it relates to that.
Well,
But
and
yeah.
I just wanted to add too that sometimes it doesn't matter how much persistency you have. It doesn't matter how persistent you are. In some cases, I don't know how many times we've been courting a retailer, and this is not necessarily, I've only been with Wildomar for a year, so I don't have a whole lot of stories yet to share about that experience, because we've already determined it's at least 2, 3, 5, 10 years before I'm going to have those kind of fun stories. But I can't tell you, with some other cities, we've been courting like a retailer, for example. And retailers, what people need to understand, if you don't know the retail world or the commercial world, retailers will have their own criteria. They need to be on the morning side of traffic. They need to be freeway frontage, not freeway frontage. They want to be near a Starbucks, not near a Starbucks. They have a whole range of criteria that needs to be fulfilled. And sometimes in certain cities, especially pretty much anything in Southern California, you look around and go, okay, well, that would be this spot right here, but there's somebody in it, or it's not developed yet, or whatever the case may be. So sometimes we struggle to look around and find that prime spot. And sometimes we talk to these retailers for years to get them interested in a prime spot, and they don't jump until after that prime spot has been taken by somebody else, or we finally get the opportunity to put them together with that property owner or whatever the case may be, and they can't come to an agreement. Maybe that property owner wants 4 times what the actual market value is for that land or for that plaza or for that building or whatever. We don't have any control over that. That's just something, you know, we're like the matchmakers of business. We go out and find the business. We want to put it in this plaza or on this piece of land. But like in Wildomar's case, we don't own any land. We don't control the land. We can't force that property owner to put that car dealership there, or to put that thing there, right? So, and that sometimes they have other ideas that you have no idea. Like the landowner might say, I would never sell to a car dealership. I wanted this to be a zoo, or I mean, whatever, you know, they're private owners themselves, and they have the right to sit on their property and do what they choose to do with it within zoning compliance. But so sometimes it's not as easy. There's a lot of variables along the way, and a lot of those variables we don't necessarily control. So even courting someone for a long period of time, I know there was a few retailers where we finally got them to look at what we wanted them to look at, and there was no more vacancies in that particular, you know, scenario. And it can be very frustrating. But those are some of the variables that go along with it as well.
Kim, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of times there might be an opportunity for that one desired retailer, but they'll only go if they can get that one corner. But that one owner wants way too much money, and they're never going to pay it. And that's the end of the discussion. It's not a block down or a block on the other side of the street. It's that corner because it has everything that that particular group wants. And that's the only way they get a one shot in your city.
Mhm.
And it sometimes can be that simple and that straightforward. And if they don't get that one corner, they're out. They're going to go somewhere else. And so it's not, you know, sometimes completely, it can be totally out of our control for exactly what you just mentioned. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and I like the allusion to Fiddler on the Roof with Matchmaker, and I think we could all break into song now over that. There's a lot of good songs in there, just in case you guys haven't watched Fiddler on the Roof, especially the 72 movie version. So following up on that, you talk about retailers and the way they look. Each one I feel like has a specific set that they're looking at. And what I find funny is there are retailers that tell us, well, we're going to see how this store does in a neighboring city. And if it does well, they may end up coming to you because they realize there's a market down here. On the other hand, if it does well, they may realize they don't need to come to you because your market's already going to them.
Right.
So deciding whether it's zip code, people coming from your zip code to support that store is good or bad is completely subjective to that individual retailer. And so it becomes kind of a challenge sometimes to know, you know, what is the right thing to do or what is the right way to recruit, because each one looks at it with such a different set of eyes.
Yep.
Well, and you know, one thing I would add too is, to some extent, given what we've been dealing with this pandemic, you could make an argument that kind of all bets are off going forward for, I know I mentioned it, Scott, I'm sorry.
We don't talk about that.
But, you know, to some extent, especially if you're talking about just sort of shopping, not food servers per se, but mall shopping, I think that's going to be completely revolutionized and change as we move forward. And it was already heading in that direction. So I would say if you're out there watching and saying, what are you guys going to do with the empty mall or the empty stores? Why don't you get this other one to fill it? I think you need to really rethink what those types of shopping experiences or whatever other type of experience it turns into, because it may not be a shopping experience moving forward, because it's changed so dramatically over the last 10 years, and then this has just exacerbated it so much worse. So I'd say, fasten your seatbelts and just watch what's going to happen with the retail environment, because all these folks you've been used to going to, probably a lot of them aren't going to be around anymore. At least not in the number of locations like they had, because they figure, you're going to go maybe to Orange County for that Nordstrom's, because that's basically what we're dealing with, or San Diego County, whatever the case may be. But I'd say, yeah, all bets are off now.
Yeah, but a lot of times, and not necessarily in today's particular circumstances, but a lot of times these shifts are for the better. So that while you may go into, and you've seen this, Christine, with your mall, you watch some of the stores maybe go away, but they're replaced by some entertainment uses. And eventually you get a blend that is more dynamic and useful than it was before, so that it's not kind of the same kind of store over and over again, but now all of a sudden you have places to go for recreation, places to go for eating, places to go for shopping, and you can really make a more of an event out of your travel. So, and Rob, to that point, I mean, I think what you're going to see is an even greater blend, right? You're going to see more opportunities to get your medical and healthcare needs fulfilled in that visit, or even your living needs. You may walk downstairs and walk right into the Mongolian barbecue, and how perfect is that? So I think in time, you're going to see just a greater dynamic blend of different uses together, which just creates more of an experience altogether. And maybe the end result is something that everybody is going to like. Christine, what do you think?
I agree. And I think we can't forget that the market is always evolving. And I always think back years and years ago in our city, like we had a Mervyn's, and the Mervyn's was like the biggest thing. Everyone went to Mervyn's, and that was like the shopping center. And if you would have asked, I don't know, 20 years ago, would Mervyn's ever go out of business, people would be like, what, you're crazy, but look where we're at now. And it's business after business is like that. And, it's constantly changing. And I think that's just like life. It's constantly changing. And so sometimes I think some people get a little bit to overboard where, oh my gosh, all brick and mortar is going away. What are we going to do with this? And it's like, okay, I agree with you to some point, but at the end of the day, trends are changing. People, companies file bankruptcy and then another company saves them. I mean, Forever 21 is an example in our city, a 19,000 square foot building. At first it was going bankrupt, and then entertainment restaurant was already about to go in, and then Forever 21 was saved by a company, and now they're staying. So I'm closely watching the internet. I fully believe it's evolving, but it's going to evolve anyway. And our mall was going to evolve anyway. So I think that's my point.
Well, too, Christine, you reminded me too to make the point that some developers and development companies have partnerships with retailers too. So we've run into that problem as well, where let's just say we're hoping for a Pete's Coffee, let's say, and we've got a new development going on, but that developer might have a specific agreement with Starbucks or with Dunkin' or with a particular brand that then excludes Pete's Coffee, for example, or they might have an exclusive agreement with Home Depot instead of Lowe's, and so on and so forth. So we don't always, I've always tried to make the point whenever I talk to residents that we don't get to pick the flavor of the ice cream. We get to tell people, you can put industrial here, you can put commercial here, you can put retail here, but we don't necessarily get a say in what that looks like. So we're not allowed to get into the weeds about whether or not it's a Greek restaurant or a Mexican restaurant, right? So most of that is left up to the plaza owners and to the developers that might have the agreements already in place with certain type of retail businesses. So that can be very frustrating as well, because I know each one of us for our cities, we have ideas of what we would like to see go where, and they're very good ideas for very good reasons. We know what would do well on what corner and why it would do well and what wouldn't do well, but sometimes we can't fight against what either those development agreements are between other retailers or just the property owners' ideas of what needs to go in there as well.
Yeah, and for a good reason, right? I mean, as much as we want to put something somewhere, sometimes we want the private market to take care of itself.
Right.
Our job is only valuable as long as we can be of value. And when we stop being of value, we need to get the heck out and let people take care of their business. And so it's really a good thing. And I love the way that this conversation is really geared towards evolution. There's this whole evolving state, and Rob, you brought it up with the Darwinian selection that's happening in the market. And then at the same point, we still have this great Fiddler on the Roof reference, which the big song tradition, you have the tradition, and do you change from the old ways or do you evolve into the new ways? And so I think it all kind of ties together here somewhere, which very important to see. The evolution of our conversation is really heading towards one that is fluid and dynamic. Good to know.
I think I just want to make one more point too, that I think people need to understand just some of the challenges that we have is that some of these retailers will also have non-compete clauses put into their agreement. So I just had the fun experience of someone who wants to open up an independent coffee shop. And as they were looking around at some of the developed plazas already that either already have a Starbucks or something else already in it, there's already NDAs signed for those plazas for no more coffee. So, it's really not as easy. I think the general public looks and goes, how come we don't have this? And they don't put it right there. There's so much that goes on. That's kind of like that little tip of the iceberg, and you don't see everything underneath the water. There's so much more underneath the water. And, frankly, if it was that easy to just call them up and put them right there, probably none of us would really have a job for very long, because it would all be done and we could go home after the first day and it would be done. But there's always so much going on, whether you're trying to court the property owner to have them understand the vision of the city to hopefully put the tenants in place that the city wants to see. You're courting the developers to, first of all, bring them to your city if you have undeveloped property or you need something redeveloped. So there's so much going on under the surface that most people really have no idea that all of that occurs and how challenging it can be to get exactly what you want in the space that you want in the exact timing that you want. That's a lot of variables coming together to make a miracle in some cases.
And non-compete clauses go beyond just like for like. So it might not be a coffee shop that you wanted to put there. Sometimes it may be a bakery. It may be something that you seem as doesn't seem to be competitive, but to somebody out there it did when they wrote up the agreement. And they've now blockaded a center from having a whole slew of uses that may have gone there otherwise.
And you know, that's a great point, Scott. When Epic Rollertainment was looking for a spot in Murrieta, they came across a lot of large retailers that had a non-compete with a family fun center. And so they had a big challenge, and it's not, you just wouldn't think that. You wouldn't know that as just a general resident. You would have no idea. Why couldn't they go there? There was a big furniture store out of business there or there, you know, whatever. Because they did, Epic Rollertainment got started during the recession. So there was actually a few big industrial spots that you would have thought they could go into, but they had a little bit of a challenge finding the right place to go into. So that's a perfect illustration of what you're talking about, because there were a lot of large retailers that would not allow that in their plaza, and people would be blown away by that. They don't realize that.
And those kind of circumstances, I think, really draw to why economic development is regional, right? Because they could have just as easily not found a space inside this city and went to another city just because they like the region, this is where they wanted to be. But if it doesn't work out in one center, you've got to move on to the next. And I think we've all had that experience where you work really hard to bring a retailer and get them to look from out of the area at this area. And then they may or may not be able to reach an agreement with the broker or with the center that they're working with, and they end up slipping somewhere else. And this happens to all of us, and it's all one big trade-off. And it works out in the long, you know, in the wash, we know the fouls and the calls are all going to even out over the course of the game. But in individual circumstances, you win some and you lose some. And I think that just kind of plays into that entire scenario.
Yep.
Patrick Ellis, back to you.
Very good. Well, I think the persistency and then the evolution are the two things, right? Because they kind of go hand in hand, obviously, based on the discussion. I think that the evolution of things is critical in today's day and age, you know, so much, especially in the retail side. But I felt like I wanted, if you have ever seen the show Around the Horn, where they give points to the different sports writers and stuff, I wanted to give points out for certain references. You know, the evolution, I wanted to give points, the Darwinism, the Fiddler on the Roof, I may have wanted to take points away, but you know, you never know.
Everybody should, great songs, guys. If you don't like musicals, we don't have anything left to say.
I've never seen that movie. Never even seen it.
Rob, tonight you're watching Fiddler on the Roof. Tonight.
I'm never gonna watch it.
It's about 3 hours long, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's never gonna happen.
Shame.
Well,
Shame.
I want to thank you all again for joining us. Another rousing discussion around economic development. I appreciate all of you spending your time with us. So until next week, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. And everyone get out there and have a great day.
Safely.
Thank you.
Thank you.